Alright guys, I just cannot get motivated, so in a fit of procrastination, I thought maybe I would try to be motivated in a different way and just kind of share what's going on here with Sippy Cup. The mess I've gotten myself into about a week ago is really not so bad, but like I said, just not into it right now. We've got a timing belt going on, which it looks like maybe my lighting's not the best, a little hard to see, but the motor's jacked up, timing belt's off, water pump's off, front pulley's off, tensioner, all that good stuff gone. Got our old school 90s, more like 60s vacuum operated cruise control torn off. Got the alternator broken loose. Whole bunch of little things kind of gone out of our way so we can work. Got the thermostat housing removed because we're just putting a new thermostat on for good measure. That was a super pain. These bolts just love to break off in the thing. I'm gonna guess this is a common thing with a lot of engines that have side thermostat housings. The coolant likes to leak down into these bolt holes, fills them up with gummy coolant after about 25 years. It's a lot of fun to deal with. Took about 3 hours to get that off. We've also got heater core hose, which I'm gonna also guess you can't see, but it's there, trust me. We've popped there we go. We popped the heater core hose off just to replace it, because that's the one that runs right to the water pump, so good a time as any to go ahead and do that. The one on the other side, it's kind of a mess. It's got this emissions control, temperature sensors and stuff in it. Try and get it, there we go, that guy. There's a bunch of stuff back here behind it. It's a real hassle to deal with, so I think maybe some other day there. It's no harder to do later on after the timing belt's done. After all that, we get this all put back together. We've got to do brakes and full steering and new struts and everything else on this car. Should just be not much fun at all, really. It's not a hard car to work on, but it's straightforward stuff, and you know, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but you know, thought maybe some of you might want to come into my shop and just kind of see what's going on and have a little bit of an experience with me, good or bad, and we'll see what happens from here. Maybe some folks will enjoy it, maybe some folks won't, but that is how we're going to spend Saturday. Here you guys go. Here's I think a good example of why I'm going to call a large series of videos, if I decide to proceed forward, pardon me, The Broken Life, because in the midst of doing other projects, I always end up with new ones. Down here you'll see the good old trusty orange old school Harbor Freight floor jack, one of those ubiquitous items that they first came out with in the US when their stores started to really sprout up in the early 2000s. It's been an awesome jack for me, but jack the motor up to do the timing belt and clean up everything, and the motor starts dropping. And you know, of course, now I have a jack stand in there, which is always a good idea anyway. But start investigating a little bit, and hey, what's all this oil all over the floor? Well, turns out the jack has decided to spring a leak. And the really cool thing about this is when I bought the jack, it came with an O-ring kit for spares, so they must have foreseen this coming, and I assure you, I promptly threw that away in about 2005 as soon as it came out of the box. So this is just another one of those things that happens when you know, are maybe kind of on a budget and wrenching at home, and just sort of a rains it pours type of deal. So, you know, stay tuned for the jack build at some point. Well, guys, a very strange thing happened. It actually did work out that now I'm kind of motivated to work on the car, but it's not because I actually want to work on the car. It's because I reviewed the footage and I want to know what's going to happen next, which is super, super strange because this is my car. This is my garage. These are my tools. I know what's going to happen next, but when I review the footage, it's like watching somebody else, so now it's kind of fun. And I also immediately noticed that you guys cannot see anything I was trying to show you. So we're going to do a little bit of a do-over here. I probably should have mentioned this is kind of my first attempt ever at doing anything like this, so it's going to be pretty bad, but hopefully you can stick it out with me and we'll see. So yeah, timing belt. Got my Egyptian brain removing tool here. We have our cam gear. You'll see, no belt. This is where the water pump used to live, right down here. So we have to clean up this mating face for the new pump, new gasket. And right down there, perhaps, if we can cooperate whatsoever. And it's getting worse as we go. Right down there is the crank gear. So that's what needs going over there. This is probably only marginally better than it was a moment ago, but now you've got some idea. Over here, what I was trying to show you on that hose is, and this is going to become a thing, I clearly need to work on my lighting and things like that, is this hose goes into this block of things back here, which has these sensors in them. And these are actually crimped on hoses to this housing. You can cut these crimps off and then just put hose clamps on, or however you want to go about it. But this is what I was trying to say we just do not want to mess with today. So anyhow, that is a little bit more helpful to you than what I'd shown before. So what I'm going to do next is clean up these gasket faces on both sides of the motor. We're going to get them ready to go with some high-tack. And before I put them on, I'll go ahead and go over just how I use high-tack, why I prefer high-tack, things like that. And then we'll start putting parts back on. Alright guys, we're at a little bit of a crossroads here. I'm working on cleaning up the side of the head for the new thermostat, put the thermostat housing back on, and it's going about as good as it always goes, right? And what I'm seeing is there's, still some gasket left, and you may not be able to see it very well, but there's little black speckles and things in here that are just kind of being a pain to get off, right? So the way I usually like to strip gaskets and prepare faces and things like that is with a 3M Scotch-Brite wheel, grade very fine. These are the, I think, second least aggressive cut wheels you can get. They are disturbingly expensive, but they usually do a pretty good job. But what I think I'm actually running up against is I think this stuff is actually kind of pitted up. I cleaned up the thermostat housing itself. Let's see if I can get a little better light. And you can see those little pop marks and stuff all around it. Those are actually like little itty bitty pits. Usually a new thermostat housing for an ancient car like this would be $10 or $15, and I would normally just buy a new one and off we would go because I don't want to have problems later. My time is more valuable to me than doing this job twice. And I was positive I did that, except I probably did it 2 years ago, and the new one of these is MIA. She's out of here. So what I'm going to do is take slightly more aggressive means to clean things up than just the 3M wheel. So what I have done, at least on the cylinder head, is went to it with the 3M, then took just some good old 120 grit to it, and that works, but it takes 800,000 years. So what I'm going to do is try out something new I got. I've got one of these little conical wire wheels that is specifically intended for a die grinder, and it doesn't look all that aggressive, but I think what we're going to do is try it out here on the old water pump and see if it just chews a gigantic hole in it or if it cleans things up nice, and see if that's something we want to do on the cylinder head. So stay tuned. I won't subject you to air tool noises. Well, that's an affirmative hell to the nizzo. If you look at this ear, which maybe, yep, I did this one with the roll-lock wheel, with the 3M wheel. And you can see it's, a little pitted up still, because that's what happens. This is an old coolant component. And then the other side, I did just with the wire brush. And come on, maybe. Yeah, there we go. There we go. It looks like the surface of the moon. It just pitted it right on up. Bunch of craters. That's not what we're looking for. So The wire brush is pretty cool. That's one that's rated for 20,000 RPM. I'm sure it'll be handy for steel and stuff like that. For gasket prep, no chance. And then here's just the box of 3M wheels that I'm using. These are the grade very fine Scotch-Brites. This AVFN, that's what you're looking for, the very fine. These are 1.5 inch diameter. They come in all different sizes, varying cost. This box of 50 is like 40 bucks. So these I pretty strictly only use for aluminum and stuff like that. I'd use something more aggressive, less expensive, like standard sandpaper wheels or whatever, for a lot of other issues. Well guys, like the 5th or 6th worst possible thing that could happen here did. Getting all set up for my really professional photo shoot here for you, and realized that my high-tack is at my father's house, like an hour and a half away, so we had to go to the parts store to get more, which always sucks. But while I was there, I went ahead and got some stop leak for my wallet, because you know that's how it goes. You just bleed money whenever you work on anything. But anyhow, we're back to it now. I've got all my gasket faces cleaned up. Did that, some of that with even the old knot Dremel there, and I'll show you why and how. Right down there, you see that's where the water pump goes. It's looking all nice and clean now. And where we had to use the knot Dremel is right around the edge of the water pump gasket. You'll see that's pretty thin. That's only about maybe 3/16 or 1/4 inch thick on pretty much both sides of it. I've already had to do an Escort water pump because this gasket failed and started weeping right at those corners. So to really get down in there, light back, to really get down in there at that edge, we really want to make sure that's all clean and that everything's going to stick as well as it can. And you might be asking me, you know, hey Max, how clean does it really have to be? Well, how much do you want it to leak? My answer to that is always 0. I want 0% leaks. So it took me about an hour and a half to clean up these mating surfaces, to get everything the way I wanted it, to clean up the thermostat housing and all that stuff. And it's pretty much looking good to go. So the next thing I'm going to do now is these, like I said, these like to both galvanic corrode because we have an aluminum head and steel fasteners, and coolant likes to leak into them, weep into them, because the thermostat seal is kind of the same story, where there's actually not, it's awful. There's actually not a lot of space between where the thermostat goes and these bolt holes. So they do like to weep some coolant in there. I think the bigger issue is probably that people don't seal the O-ring that goes in here correctly. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But, so the next thing I'm going to do, rambling a little there, sorry, is I'm going to go ahead and run the bolts in with nothing on it but some anti-seize in these 3 holes. Then I'll take the bolts back out. We'll clean this up so there's no anti-seize on it. We'll high-tack the gasket and get it ready to go. And then the bolt heads themselves, we'll put a little bit of RTV on, so that any kind of leaking that might happen between here and here hopefully doesn't weep all the way down the hole. And for bolts, so like I said, we broke one. I have some stainless cap heads, which I'm hoping the cap head isn't a big problem. And stainless into aluminum is really no better or worse than steel into aluminum. So these need to be anti-seized anyway. What I'm trying to do is anti-seize this part, but then seal up this part. So I'm going to get the thermostat housing put on first because it's a little easier to deal with, and get the gasket all high-tacked and ready to go. And when I'm ready for that, I'll probably bring it back. I'm not going to high-tack stuff on camera or anything because it's super messy. There are also some other good news in the fact that I had to go to the store. This can is $6, $5.99. A can of this is enough to do your whole neighborhood. So having 2 brand new cans that I can lose for the next 30 years is just super. But anyway, it has occurred to me that I have not yet explained why it was worth so much time to intentionally make a trip down to the store to get this stuff. All this really is a gasket sealer. It says right on it, gasket sealant. And what you'll see on this guy, and I think I've showed this a little bit before, is we have all these little pits. There are pits and imperfections and stuff all over this. And I wouldn't guarantee it for sure, but I'm sure if you ask the fine folks at Felpro, they would tell you that they engineer their gaskets to seal and you don't need to use anything. That's why there's a gasket. What Felpro probably isn't engineering into their program is these 30-year-old parts. I'm not saying they would or wouldn't tell you to use a sealant on this. I'm going to. I use high-tack as opposed to silicone or RTV or anything like that because straight up it just works. I've think one time ever had high-tack leak again on me, and that was likely my fault. I think I over-torqued the gasket, but high-tack's good stuff. Some other items to note: if you buy a thermostat or you buy a water pump, it'll come with a gasket. Unless you absolutely have to, never use those. The gaskets you will get will be the cheapest thing possible. They'll be from Indochina or wherever, and you don't know what you're getting. These jobs are too much work. They take too much time. They're too expensive already to not buy a quality gasket. Like I said, I'm using Felpro here. I think I ordered these gaskets from Rock Auto for like $1 each. And much to my surprise, and I'm going to guess things may not be this way anymore, but check that out. Made in USA. Water pump gasket, USA. So, is everyone capable of making good things these days? Yes. Do I feel better about using stuff that I know is made in America, where we have quality controls and where, I know that somebody either will get or perhaps in the past did get a paycheck and feed their family because I'm helping? Yeah, I do feel good about that. And so these gaskets were like $1 or $2 a piece. There's no real reason not to. I just want to use quality gaskets if I can. Another item of note I didn't speak much about is thermostat. Nothing real special going on here, but what I wanted to say is that this guy, and this is the gasket I was talking about that goes with it earlier. The reason these are not currently together is because whenever I replace a thermostat, I always boil it first. When I say boil it, it is what it sounds like. I take this and I put it in a pot of water on the stove and I turn the water up to boil and I drop the thermostat in, make sure it's going to open and close and work properly. This thermostat is advertised as being manufactured by Gates, which is a quality name brand. I have no clue who actually makes this for them. It may be the same thing as the cheapest thermostat you'll find in the world. But all the same, I want to check that and make sure this is right, because this is, the way I like to do things anyway, this is probably a couple-hour job for me to get the cylinder head cleaned up, get the thermostat housing cleaned up correctly, have to drain 1.5 gallons of coolant back out of the car if this fails, or at least some portion. I just do not want to mess with that. So I'm going to use a quality part. I'm going to check that part first and make sure it works, and that's especially important on this car and cars like it that have an aluminum cylinder head, because if this car ever gets hot even once, that head's going to warp. On these cars in particular, the Ford 19 CFV or what CVF or whatever, CFI or whatever these things are called, this particular engine, I guess the one after this is really bad too. They really like to drop valve seats when they overheat. So you'll be driving the car, it'll get hot once, you'll think everything's great. You'll fix your problem, you'll be driving along one day, and then a valve seat will fall out and basically total the motor. So for me, it's just not worth that over $3 or $4 thermostat. It's certainly not worth it over just taking this out of the box and chucking it right in the motor. I've got 5 minutes to go boil a pot of water. I did that this morning when I was having my coffee and watching YouTube. But anyway, when you get these, they'll be assembled. This little gasket is on here and it's kind of clipped in. I like to take this off because when you drop this into the pan, it goes to the bottom of the pan, right? Well, the bottom of the pan is not the temperature of the water. The bottom of the pan is the temperature of the burner. So it's entirely possible that you can drop this in the bottom of the pan and this will be exposed to, maybe 400 degrees, 500, I don't know, but significantly more than the 212 degrees the water will boil at. So we don't want to melt this to the bottom of the pan because I need to use this gasket and I want to use my pan later. So we want those things to be good. Another thing I wanted to discuss a little bit is, I think previously when I said, yeah, this is all cleaned up and ready to go, I had not actually gotten in here and cleaned up that mating face where that gasket goes way down inside. That was a real pain in the ass to get down there and do. I actually had a wire wheel that is part, one of these guys that's part of a Harbor Freight kit. These are sold as to go in your drill. They're absolutely useless to put in a drill. Yeah, here's actually the kit. They say max RPM like 3,000 or something like that on them. Yeah, it's 4,500 right down in the corner. Yeah, right. Those go in the die grinder. We spin those up to about 20,000 RPM. They will come apart. You just have to be careful with your eye protection. Personally, I prefer a full face shield rather than just eye protection, so I don't like digging wires out of my cheeks. That's happened a bunch of times in my life. But anyway, one of those wheels was able to get down in here and clean this up. Again, not much fun. Had to get in here with a little dentist pick too and go around the corner just to make sure it was all as clean as it possibly could be. This again is why, if it's at all possible, for, $10, if you can get one of these for your car, just go ahead and get a new one. These are just not really worth messing with cleaning up. If $10 means the world to you, yeah, dude, have at it, man. You can sit in your chair and watch TV with a piece of sandpaper for 3 hours if you want, if that's your budget, and clean these guys up and reuse them. Hey guys, it's Editing Baymax of the future. Just wanted to get with you quick for a minute and say I think that may have come off kind of condescending. That really wasn't what I was going for. I think I was just letting the frustration of the day get to me since I didn't plan to clean my part up. It just annoyed me. But, obviously you can reuse your part, clean it up, take your time. I did. It's been on my car for about a week at this point. It's been just fine. So just wanted to stop in quick and say, sorry, not what I was trying to do. I wouldn't, except I cannot for the life of me figure out what I did with the new one I bought. And these are shockingly like $40 at the local parts stores because there's some sort of check valve in here, I think. There's actually moving parts in this housing. So anyway, that's the update on that. Back to the other side of the car. What I actually decided to do was I went ahead and put anti-seize on these bolts like I said I would. And then I've left the bolts in. I've gone back and cleaned up the mating face as well as I can. These are actually not the bolts I'm going to use. These are just spares. I bought like a 10 or 20 pack of these. But these are anti-seized. So I'm going to pull these out. I'm going to wipe down this surface again with just a rag with some mineral spirits or brake cleaner or something on it, and get that as clean as I possibly can. Then I'm going to gasket tack everything. So these will have anti-seize in the holes, but the face will be clean. So then I'm going to take my other bolts that have never had anti-seize on them, put some RTV around this portion of the head that sticks out. We discussed that a little bit ago. And use those for reassembly. So then this whole face should be clean. There shouldn't be any risk of having any grease contamination that would stop the gasket from working. And the holes will be anti-seized, and the bolts will be RTV'd to the housing. So, you can never guarantee anything, but that's about as safe as a bet as it can get to make sure that this is a properly sealing, properly operating thermostat that is hopefully not going to be a pain to replace again. I've owned a few of these cars, and I've done this job a few times now. And what I have decided, since these always leak and they always break the bolts, is that when it's due for a timing belt, which Ford says never, but in my opinion is 80,000 miles. When it's due for a timing belt, just go ahead and drop a thermostat in it too. That way, every, however many years it takes you to drive 80,000 miles, this gets replaced. This particular car doesn't even have 80,000 miles on it yet, and it's a 95. So we are doing the first thermostat, we're doing the first timing belt, we're doing the first water pump, first new hoses. Everything on this car, including the spark plugs, is as it was from Ford in 1995. So all this stuff does not want to cooperate. And so that's why we're going through some of the trouble we are now. Odds are highly favorable that all this wonderful work I'm doing will go to the junkyard with this car with me never touching it again. But if I didn't do it, you can guarantee I'd be back next year doing it again. So we're going to try and do it right. Okay, so we've got some stuff high-tacked. We've got high-tack on the thermostat housing and one side of the thermostat housing gasket. I got a bunch all over the head. Made an enormous mess. This is probably the worst job I've ever done, of course, because I'm sharing it with the world. But I got to get back to work, get this slapped on there quick so I can clean this stuff up before it really sets up. Alright, so we got it in there and buttoned up. You can see just along the edge here and up here where that high tack is kind of squished out a little bit. Now keep in mind, this isn't RTV, so we're not looking for like a big bead of it or anything like that. There's a gasket in here still, but that's kind of what we're looking for. So there's plenty in there. It's all juiced up, shouldn't leak. The Allen screws didn't really prove to be a problem. I have good access from all sides. I think in the future though, if I do another one of these, I'll probably try and get just regular hex heads because you can't just get a wrench on these. That's kind of a pain. So now basically what I'm going to do is fish this radiator hose back in, which is a super hassle. This is the radiator side, this is the water pump side, and it actually curves up through a casting to get there. Won't be a good time. But that's also something that, you know, there's really not much to be said about. I just have to stuff it back in the car, make it fit. It's better off to get this hose back in before the pump gets bolted down. So I want to get this hose in the car and get it ready to roll before we start high-tacking stuff for the water pump and everything. But that's where we're going. Where I want to stop today is to get everything high-tech, get everything glued up so it can basically sit overnight until tomorrow or whatever and just kind of cure out. So we'll check back in a bit. Alright, so there it is. Water pump's back in it. Hard to see around that hose, but it's down there. Did the same thing we did on the other side. High-tacked it. Got the gasket in. Hose is in there too. Probably can't see it. It's super buried. I actually had to drop the motor back down off the jack stand to get that. And so today, surprisingly, what we have accomplished is cleaning gasket surfaces and putting a water pump on the car and a thermostat housing and thermostat on the car and a radiator hose halfway on. It is remarkable that that took all day. Everybody always says that doing things while you make a video takes longer. I think that's especially true in my case, and I'll probably do a second video explaining my feelings about that. But anyway, here's what was done today. This is the end of the day. It's about 8:30 p.m. where I am right now, and I started about noon. So this is where I'm going to call this one. Getting it put back together and getting the timing belt and everything on should go much quicker, even with filming, and we will hopefully get it all buttoned up in one more day, and hopefully that'll be a part 2. Alright guys, I'm back at you with another update for the day. This one's a late night update. It's about 11 o'clock. Was feeling pretty good about things. You know, frankly, I was just pleased as punch with myself, and went in the house, worked on my technology issues a little that I mentioned I was having throughout the day. Got some of those resolved. Grabbed a shower. Went and hopped in what is currently my daily driver, which Sippy Cup here is supposed to be doing, but clearly isn't. That's why we're doing these things. So hopped in my daily driver. It's I hadn't really intended to introduce it to the channel on the first day. I've got enough on my hands now. But I have a 99 Jeep Wrangler, so I've got a TJ. And it just needs work too. It's just getting old and tired and just needs to come in the shop. So anyway, take it out for dinner, and you guys are probably going to laugh here because I would. There is a new combination truck stop Hardee's just up the road from me. It is now the second closest fast food eatery to a truck stop McDonald's to where I live. I actually don't live like in the middle of a cornfield, but not far from. I'm kind of outside a bigger town in a small neighborhood. But anyway, so this is like the exciting thing now is, ooh, we have a Hardee's, and I haven't had Hardee's in like forever. So I'm like, cool, I'll just hop in the Jeep, I'll go up to Hardee's, and we'll see if it's any good. You know, it's fast food, it is what it is, right? So I'm driving, everything's fine. Again, pretty happy with myself. I didn't want to do this today at all. Embarked on it anyway, starting a new thing. I've been talking about maybe making a YouTube video since time began. So I'm feeling pretty good. Rolling up the street, go to get off the highway at the exit for the Hardee's. I get off and I have to turn left, so I come back under the overpass. And as soon as I'm under the overpass, just boom, whatever was left of the exhaust manifold of the Jeep just lets go, just entirely. So I'm halfway through second gear. That's something else you'll come to discover is all of my vehicles are manual transmissions, all of them. I don't own an automatic that is in a working vehicle currently. So yeah, no present need of an automatic transmission. So anyway, just shifting into, or just getting ready to shift into third gear. So I'm like, I don't know, 2,500 RPM or something in second gear, and just boom. And I'm like, what happened? What broke? Oh no, is the exhaust dragging the ground? And I'm staring right at the truck stop at this point. And it's like, well, I don't even know if this Hardee's is open. The McDonald's was my plan B. So I was like, well, I'm here. I'm not going to just go back home, so it's going to have to go home anyway. So I pull into the drive-through, and there's a woman in front of me placing this ridiculously huge order. And for about the first 10 seconds, I leave the Jeep running, and I'm like, well, this probably isn't cool. So I shut it down. And then I can hear the conversation between her and the clerk. And Hardee's is new here. And frankly, I'm kind of new here. I've only lived here for about a year. And the woman is asking like 10,000 questions about the menu, and the clerk's really excited to talk to her about it. And, oh, this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, our fries are so much better than so-and-so's and blah, blah, blah. The girl's like chatting her up on the speaker box, right? It's like, okay, well, that's cool. It should be good customer service, you know, hopefully some good food. When Hardee's is good, it's really good. This goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm, you know, sitting there, like I said, shut the Jeep off, and I'm hearing all this. So I pull up and hit the key, and just whoa, just pure noise. I pull up to the speaker and immediately turn the key back off and place my order, and the girl's like, "That it?" Yeah. Reads me the total. She, you know, doesn't say thank you or anything like that at all. And I'm like, what in the world? So I get up the window, and I get pretty much more of the same treatment. She misses some of my food, which, you know, that happens too. But the whole time I'm like a huge inconvenience. And I know the whole reason I'm a huge inconvenience is because I am driving what sounds like and in some ways looks like a complete turd. So I got Buzz Killington off of my good day just for, you know, other deferred maintenance I knew was coming, which is why this car's under the knife. But it's, you know, it's the same story with me. Is it's always, you know, a day late, $1 short, right? So we were more than a day late. This has been in the making for legitimately like 2 years. This has gone on way too long. I'll tell the backstory of this car soon, which you may actually get before you see this, but it'll all become more clear. But hilariously, the reason the car is in the shop now and doing all these things because the Jeep needs to come off the road, and now the Jeep really, really needs to come off the road. So this one's got to go to work Monday, or I'm probably not going to go to work Monday. I don't have a very long commute, but I'm just not going to drive with exhaust. It's likely going to fall completely off soon. So it's just one hit after another. One project begots projects. Kind of a funny side note here. Coming home, you know, I live in a neighborhood. You can see this just a 2-car garage. I'm taking it real easy going through the neighborhood, right? So it's like, you know, first gear up to like 1,500 RPM, just, you know, second gear just off idle, just trying to get through the neighborhood, trying to be quiet, trying to be polite to my neighbors. When I do this and I get in the driveway and everything, and I haven't made a huge scene, and as soon as I get out of the car, I hear people yelling. They're like, what has happened? Why is he yelling? And I don't hear anything else. And I stand there for a minute, and I got my food and everything with me. And then I hear more, what is now become clear is like a drunken party behind one of my neighbors' houses where they're just screaming and having a good time. And, you know, it's Saturday night, whatever. But it's just pretty funny that I creep back through the neighborhood with my figurative tail between my legs, trying to not look like an ass. And my neighbors are just screaming, hollering, and drunk. So anyway, the pressure's on now. Now we've got to get this done tomorrow because it has to go to work Monday. And I would like to go to work Monday, so that is what it is. So here's the late night update, a little bit of a PS on part 1.